The sun climbed slowly over the horizon, painting the rolling hills of the vast rural estate in shades of amber and gold. For Elena, the morning light felt like a benediction, a sign that her life was finally beginning. She stood before the tall mirror in her dressing room, her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed the layers of her shimmering white silk wedding gown. Today, she was marrying Lucas, the heir to the farming estate. But beneath the lace and the celebration, Elena carried a secret that made her heart swell with both joy and anxiety. She was 3 months pregnant. Lucas had been ecstatic when he heard the news. However, his mother, Martha, the formidable matriarch of the estate, saw things differently. To Martha, Elena was nothing more than a social climber, a commoner who had ensnared her son to claim a piece of the family fortune. Martha believed Elena was tainting their noble lineage, and she had spent months making her disdain clear through cold stares and sharp remarks. Yet, as the wedding hour approached, Martha appeared at the dressing room door with an uncharacteristic softness in her eyes. "You look radiant, Elena," Martha whispered, stepping into the room. She held a velvet box containing a shimmering diamond necklace, a family heirloom. "I realized that if my son loves you, I must find a way to love you too. Please, wear this as a symbol of our new beginning." Elena felt a lump in her throat. She allowed Martha to fasten the heavy jewels around her neck, believing the bitter war between them was finally over. The older woman's hands were icy and unresponsive, but the bride was too relieved to notice the predatory glint in Martha's eyes. Only minutes remained before the ceremony was scheduled to commence. The soft strains of a string quartet could be heard drifting from the garden where the guests were gathering. Suddenly, Martha's phone buzzed, and she feigned a look of absolute, breathless panic. "Oh no, Elena. Lucas is at the back barns near the pigsty. There's a sudden legal emergency. The lawyers are insisting on a signature right now, or the wedding cannot proceed. He needs you there immediately." Caught in a whirlwind of adrenaline and fear for her future, Elena didn't stop to think. She hiked up her silk skirts and hurried after Martha, her white heels sinking into the soft grass as they bypassed the floral arches and headed toward the secluded edge of the property. The air grew heavy with the smell of damp earth and the pungent scent of the farm's livestock. When they reached the high-fenced pigsty, Elena stopped. There was no sign of Lucas or any lawyers. "Martha, where is he?" Elena asked, her heart racing as she turned around. The older woman's face had transformed. The fake smile was gone, replaced by a mask of hatred. "You really are as gullible as you are poor," Martha sneered with a chilling laugh. Before Elena could process the insult, Martha's hands were on her shoulders. With a violent and calculated shove, she sent the pregnant bride stumbling backward into the enclosure. Elena fell hard, her hands plunging into the cold, thick mud and animal waste. She looked down at her ruined dress, a symbol of her destroyed dreams. The aggressive pigs, startled by the intrusion, began to grunt and circle her. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Martha slammed the heavy iron gate shut, the metallic clang echoing like a death knell through the quiet woods. She reached through the bars, snatching Elena's phone. "Look at you," Martha laughed, watching as the filth stained the pristine white silk. A low-born girl in her natural habitat. "Don't worry about the guests, dear. I'll make sure they know exactly why you ran away." In the distance, the faint, triumphant sound of the wedding march began to play, signaling the start of a ceremony for a bride who would never arrive. Elena screamed for help, but her voice was swallowed by the howling wind and the rustle of the leaves. Martha straightened her silk suit, ensuring not a single gray hair was out of place before she emerged from the shadows of the barn. As she walked back toward the rose garden, she practiced her expression in the reflection of a dark window, a perfect blend of heartbreak and maternal concern. When she reached the altar, the music faltered. Lucas took a step forward, his eyes searching behind his mother for the flash of a white veil. Instead, he found Martha collapsing into his arms. her voice rising in a carefully choreographed wail that carried to the back row of guests. She claimed to have found a discarded note from Elena stating the wedding was a sham, the pregnancy a fabrication to extort money, and that she had fled with a secret lover. The air in the garden turned cold as the whispers began, a tide of judgment rising against the girl who wasn't there to defend herself. Lucas stood frozen, the ring heavy in his pocket, his world fracturing under the weight of his mother's calculated lies. Far from the music, Elena was fighting a different battle. The stench of the pigsty was overwhelming, a thick miasma that filled her lungs. Every time she tried to stand, her silk heels slipped in the muck, sending her crashing back down into the filth. The filth stained the white silk, turning her symbol of hope into a shroud of waste. The large hogs were agitated, their grunts turning into aggressive squeals as they jostled for space. Elena didn't cry for her ruined dress. She curled her body into a protective crescent, her arms locked tightly around her stomach. A fierce instinct took hold of her, a fire that burned through the terror. She wasn't just a bride, she was a mother, and she would not let this place be the end of her child's story. Despair solidified into a cold, diamond-hard rage as she heard distant laughter from the reception, celebrating her departure. The sound of a heavy metal bucket clattering against stone made Elena freeze. Through the wooden slats of the fence, she saw a pair of worn leather boots. It was Silas, the estate hand. He had been sent to check the perimeter, far away from the festivities. When his flashlight beam hit the muddy figure in the white dress, he nearly dropped his tools. Silas didn't ask questions. He had seen enough of Martha's cruelty over the years to know exactly what had happened. With trembling hands, he threw back the heavy iron bolt and reached down to pull Elena from the mire. "We have to call the law, Miss Elena," Silas whispered, leading her toward his tool shed. He reached for the phone, but Elena's hand, caked in dried mud, clamped down on his wrist. Her eyes were bright with a terrifying clarity. She reached up to her dress and unpinned the small silver brooch she had worn all morning. It was a nanny cam, a device she had purchased to capture candid memories. She knew the memory card held every second of Martha's betrayal, the shove, the insults, and the confession. "No police. Not yet," Elena said. "I want her to feel the full height of her victory before I pull the ground from beneath her feet." With Silas's help, Elena began cleaning herself. The silk was ruined, but she wasn't going back as a bride. She was going back as a reckoning. Silas told her the party had moved to the banquet hall, where Martha was already suggesting Lucas consider a proper match. She felt the weight of the tiny camera in her palm, a digital record of a monster's true face. As the moon rose, Elena stepped out of the shed. She moved like a ghost through the darkness, approaching the manor house where golden light spilled onto the grass. Through the windows, she saw Martha raising a crystal flute of champagne. The matriarch was smiling, toasting to a narrow escape, unaware that Elena was watching from the darkness, ready to bring the entire house of cards crashing down. The double doors of the banquet hall groaned as they swung open, cutting through the celebratory music like a jagged blade. Elena stood framed in the entrance, a stark contrast to the opulence of the room. Her white silk dress, once a masterpiece of lace and hope, was a ruin of dark mud and waste. The stench of the pigsty clung to her, a physical manifestation of the ordeal she had endured. Martha was at the podium, a crystal flute of champagne raised high as she toasted to a future free of low-born distractions. The glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the polished floor as the silence in the room became absolute. The guests stared in horrified fascination at the vengeful spirit standing before them. Lucas was the first to move. He did not hesitate, rushing from the head table with a look of pure, agonizing relief. "Elena!" he cried, his voice breaking. Martha tried to intercept him, her face a contorted mask of desperation. "Do not touch her, Lucas. She has lost her mind. Security, get this animal out of here," she shrieked, her voice reaching a frantic pitch. but the guards hesitated, paralyzed by the raw intensity in Elena's eyes. She did not look at Martha, her focus entirely on her mission. Instead, she walked with a slow, deliberate gait toward the technical booth. Without a word, she handed the technician the small silver brooch, its tiny lens glinting under the chandeliers. The giant screens suddenly flickered. The room went dark for a heartbeat before a grainy, wide-angle video began to play. The audio, captured by the high-quality microphone in the nanny cam, roared through the hall's surround sound system. Every guest watched in stunned, nauseating detail as Martha lunged at the pregnant Elena, the shove so violent it made the audience gasp. They heard Martha's voice, cold, sharp, and dripping with elitist venom, as she mocked Elena's humble roots and admitted to the trap. The video showed Martha locking the gate and walking away with the phone, leaving the bride to the mercy of the agitated hogs. The evidence was undeniable, a digital confession of a crime that no amount of money could erase. Martha collapsed against the podium, her world disintegrating. But the nightmare was only beginning. As the video looped, Silas stepped through the doors, followed by the county sheriff and a team of lawyers. Elena turned to the crowd, her voice steady and echoing with the weight of her survival. She revealed that Silas had helped her contact the executors of the late patriarch's estate. Martha's husband had left a moral standing clause in his will, a failsafe against the very cruelty she had displayed. By assaulting his heir's wife and child, she had triggered a total forfeiture of her rights to the family fortune. She was not just a criminal, she was now a pauper in the eyes of the law. The sheriff stepped forward, the metallic click of handcuffs echoing through the silent hall. As Martha was led away, her screams for mercy were ignored by the people she had spent a lifetime trying to impress. Lucas took Elena's hand, his eyes filled with shame for his mother and an ironclad devotion to his wife. He stepped away from the podium, publicly renouncing the legacy of hatred Martha had tried to preserve. He promised that the farm would no longer be a fortress of exclusion, but a sanctuary for those the world had cast aside. A few months later, the setting sun cast long, peaceful shadows over a new porch. Elena sat in a rocking chair, her hand resting on the life kicking inside her. The air smelled of jasmine, sweet and heavy. Far away, behind cold iron bars, Martha sat in a different kind of silence. There were no toasts or crystal flutes, only the haunting, phantom sound of pigs grunting in the darkness of her cell, a reminder of the filth and the pit she had dug for herself.